Hello, and welcome world to Gothenburg, Sweden for the 8th Annual Inclusive Business Forum. Wait a sec, the lighting's terrible here. Can't we do something about it? Thank you, that's much better. As I was saying, welcome to the 8th Annual Inclusive Business Forum. My name is Mike Debelak, and I'm the Executive Director of Inclusive Business Sweden, your host for today. We are super excited to welcome you here from wherever you are around the world. At our forum today, we will be focusing on value chains, the series of business activities that bring us the products and services we consume in our everyday lives. In particular, we will focus on how to make these value chains future-proof, that is, more sustainable and inclusive. Why is this so important? Well, value chains, for example, provide us with the food we eat, involving farmers, processors, and distributors to provide us with what we need.
That's great, thanks a lot. Thank you.
Value chains, of course, don't just bring us food, but all the products and services we need. Everything from construction materials, to electronics, to the clothes on our back and the shoes on our feet. But globally, value chains are in crisis. Unsustainable business practices, the climate crisis, and the global pandemic have exposed weaknesses in global value chains. This not only affects supply, but the hundreds of millions of people who rely on these value chains for their livelihoods. Looking towards the future, if we don't transform our value chains and protect the people and communities that produce for us, we can be facing a future where we struggle to produce what we need to survive and to thrive. Furthermore, if we fail to protect the environment and address climate change, our future can look very bleak indeed. Making value chains future-proof is key to ensuring business success and to making progress towards the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. The Inclusive Business Forum will challenge participants to collaborate on transforming value chains for a more sustainable and equitable future. So we welcome you and hope you take the opportunity to not only listen to some of the great speakers we have lined up today, but to connect and form meaningful partnerships with other participants from around the globe.
Hello, and welcome again to the Inclusive Business Forum 2021, focusing on future-proofing value chains. We're very excited to have you all here today. I hope you've managed to navigate the technology and join us online or on the live stream. But we're very happy that you can join us. Just a little bit of information. You can obviously probably have found the website for the event, inclusivebusinessforum.com, where you should be able to navigate, and we'll help you a bit with that later on. And the hashtag IBF2021 if you want to share anything about the event. But let's get into it. First of all, we would like to start just with a quick poll using the power of Zoom. We just want to gauge the feeling out there and ask you the question: how excited are you about being here with us today? Okay, so hopefully this question will come up, and you have 4 choices there. So if you can pick one of those, and then we'll see what the results are. You can choose from very excited, very, very excited, super duper excited, or this is going to be the most exciting day of my life. So I think some results have come in. Shall we have a look at the results? Okay, so we got the results in. It's good to see people are so excited about being here today. I can say on behalf of myself and the team here at Inclusive Business Sweden, we're very excited to be hosting you all, and look forward to working with you throughout the course of the day. I'm just going to very quickly go through the agenda for today. We've got a lot planned. There's going to be a lot of different activities, and there's going to be a lot of opportunities for inspiration and interaction. We're going to go through a quick welcome to help guide you about how to make the most of the day. And then we're going to follow that with 4 speakers, as well as a couple of question and answer sessions with these speakers, where I'm sure you will be inspired by some of these speakers and what they've done, and we'll introduce them soon enough. About 12 o'clock, we'll have a break for lunch. Wherever you may be, it might be dinner, it might be breakfast, who knows. And then we're going to go into the calls to action, which will be a set of workshops, 7 workshops that are specifically designed, first of all, to be very concrete and hands-on, working with real businesses and real cases, but also we have designed them so that it can enable cross-sector collaboration between the different participants in the workshops. So yeah, please join for those. You should all be able to get a lot out of those. After sharing the outcomes of those, we will have one-on-one matchmaking meetings facilitated by the B2Match technology we're using today, where you'll be able to book, and you can book already if you haven't, you'll be able to book up to 6 15-minute meetings during that time. Then finally, we'll have one more speaker, Preeti Sinha from the UNCDF, the UN Capital Development Fund, who should also be quite inspiring and share a lot about what they're doing. And that will close at 4:30. And then finally, we'll have for those that are here in Gothenburg, Göteborg, Sweden, we will be able to have a bit of mingling, joining us here at our offices. So all these times are Central European time. You should be able to see through the website what times apply to your specific location. So now, just a couple of points. Now, it's not too late. If you are on our live stream and keen to watch some of the speakers this morning, but you would actually like to join the afternoon call to action sessions, or have one-on-one meetings with other participants, you can still register by going to inclusivebusinessforum.com and register. You'll need to do this if you want to join in those more interactive sessions. And if you are live living in Göteborg and would like to join us for a mingle after the event, you can RSVP via LinkedIn, and we're sharing the link to that in the chat box. So I would love to have mingles with you all around the world, but that's not unfortunately possible in this day and age. So before we go forward, I'd just like to introduce you to your hosts today, Inclusive Business Sweden. Our organization is based here in Gothenburg, Sweden, and is on a mission to transform markets to meet global development needs. Now, what do we mean by this? Well, we do three things. One is we work with value chains and helping to make value chains more inclusive and sustainable. And this is really a lot of the focus of what we'll be working on today. We also work with improving access to products, services, and solutions for low-income markets. So access to things like nutritional food, clean energy, clean water, sanitation, health services, and so forth. Trying to make sure that the low-income people have these solutions so that they can meet their basic needs. And finally, we work a lot with partnerships, particularly cross-border partnerships, a lot of the times between Sweden and developing markets, but also between different actors in society, industry, the public sector, civil society, and the investment community. So that's very briefly what we do. And here's a picture of our fantastic team who have all put in efforts to not only the work we do in general, but to today to bring it all together for you to run a fantastic, well, what we hope to be a fantastic forum. Here's a little bit of a sample of the work we do. I won't go into this in detail, except to say that a couple of the programs we're running are also connected with the forum today, particularly innovations against poverty and inclusive ventures. I'll go into those in a bit more detail. But we work with different programs as well as directly with businesses and other organizations to transform markets to meet global development needs. To date, we're happy to say that we have managed to enable 178 businesses across 14 countries, you can see here. And we're quite happy with that result, but we definitely want to do a lot more. And as always, we're very much focused on impact and very much focused on helping to shift the dial and try to move us towards the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals, particularly working with areas such as poverty, hunger, clean energy and water, decent work and economic growth, as well as the circular economy and climate action. That's a lot of the focus of our work. And finally, we work, as mentioned, with we try to work with a lot of partners. And here's a sample of some of our clients, members, and partners that we've worked with and that we're currently working with. We're always open to collaboration, so feel free to contact us after the event if there are opportunities to work together. Okay, but that's enough about us. We're here to focus on the forum. And what I'm going to do now is just take you through a little bit to help guide you to make the most of today. First of all, today has been made possible with the support of some of our funders as well as some of our partners. Firstly, in the Inclusive Ventures program, where we have the support from the European Regional Development Fund as well as Västra Götalandsregionen. And this is focused on where we are based in West Sweden, working with SMEs in collaboration with other actors to grow their ambitions to meet global development needs. And as part of this, we've been delivering an Inclusive Ventures Accelerator for West Swedish businesses to work in this space. This year, we're also happy to have, as forum partners, the Innovations Against Poverty program, which we have been working with since 2016, working with partners such as SNV and Bopink, as well as the support of the great support we get from CEDA. And this program challenges the private sector to develop products, services, and business models that can contribute to the fight against poverty and climate protection. The website's there. This program is focusing much more globally, particularly on supporting businesses that work in Cambodia, Ethiopia, Uganda, and Zambia. And we have a lot of these businesses that are joining us in the program today. So a few exciting facts about today. We have 5 awesome headline speakers coming up. We didn't get a ton of speakers. We never do. We would try to get the best ones, quality, not quantity. We have 7 calls to action to collaborate on. And just an update before this, we had 286 registered participants joining from over 50 countries. So that's really exciting, and it's great to have such a mix and such diversity in our participation. I think there's a lot we can learn from each other. We already have 41 meetings booked, and you have the opportunity to book more meetings as we go, and we just have 6 hours left. So we really encourage you to make the most of it. So who's in the room today? You can see very briefly there that we have a fairly good mix of business and industry, civil society, investors and funders, as well as some participation from academia and universities, the public sector, and students and the general public. In your registration, we also asked you to note which of the sustainable development goals you focus on. And we can see the top 10 in the list here, those that are focusing on poverty and decent work and economic growth, as well as industry innovation, infrastructure, climate action, and partnerships, just to name a few. So it's good to have such a mix of participants with us today, and I think we should really try to make the most of that mix. And welcome again. We hope you make the most out of today, that you use the tools that are available, that you connect with other participants, and please feel free to reach out to us during or after the event if you have any questions about the work we do or about how we can collaborate further. Great. So let's go into we're right on time, which is nice. Let's go into the headline speakers of the day. The first one I'm very happy to introduce, the first speaker of today, Professor Muhammad Yunus, who is a Nobel Peace Prize laureate, is known as the father of microfinance and the founder of Grameen Bank, the chairman and co-founder of Yunus Social Business. He has also founded over 50 social businesses in Bangladesh, and Fortune magazine named him one of the greatest entrepreneurs of our time. So I'm sure he has a lot to share with us. And today is going to be talking about the post-pandemic redesigning to create a world of 3 zeros. I think I've guessed 2 of the zeros. I hope I can guess the 3rd one as well. But I'll be interested to hear what that is. But just on a personal note, I'm sure that Professor Yunus doesn't remember this, but I definitely remember it. Meeting him when he was in Gothenburg a few years ago. I've always kind of looked up to him and the work that he does. So it's great that I can finally connect with him again after a few years. I think we both look a bit younger back then, but it's good to be able to connect with him again. I wish it could be live, but at least virtually. So welcome, Professor Yunus.
Thank you. Delighted to be with you again. Wonderful. So greetings to everybody. I'll just share with you all the things that I'm going through. I'm sure you're going through the same thing, and see what meanings these experience you have and I have. First thing that I would like to mention, that we are going through a tremendous historical moments. It's not in the context of a decade or a couple of decades. It is in the context of century. That's the importance of this interim period of 2-3 years we have from 2020, 2021, 22, these 3 years. These will be milestones, outstanding years in our historical perspective, because we got everything kind of converged into these 3 years so far. One is COVID-19. We had no expectation, no predictions, no projections of having something so global and so quick and so impactful in people's life everywhere. And this is important because of the speed and because of the way it touched every single human being on this planet. And the way we handle it. That will be another historical thing that we should be all remembering. All our ideas and all our frameworks collapsed. Our healthcare system collapsed. Our multilateralism, all the things that we have been saying that and kind of feeling proud of it, that we have a global village. Technology has brought us so close, we can feel the pulse of each other, no matter where we live in this planet. It's very close by, as if we live in the same village. But the moment, the very touch of this COVID-19, the meat disappeared right away. Suddenly we discovered ourselves as isolated islands, far, far away from each other. We can't even recognize each other anymore. Forget about giving any kind of empathy or any kind of support to each other. So we are all busy with our own islands. We couldn't care less what's happening to other islands. And it continued that way. And then it passed on to the vaccine. Vaccine made it very, very open that who cares? We don't care for each other. So everybody is busy with themselves. And it showed how our economic system worked. It's all focused on profit, maximization of profit. And vaccine became the symbol of that profit-only world, that kind of world that we have built, which led to all the other disasters that we have created. But vaccine kind of identified it and put it in a front page, that this is what we are. World has finally found the knowledge to protect themselves from vaccine, from the COVID-19 by inventing the vaccine. So the knowledge to protect people already available. But this knowledge is not shared. Again, the problem of selfishness. But this selfishness came in a very well-designed package called profit maximization. So we build the walls of profit around that knowledge so that this knowledge cannot spill over that wall and go to other places. We have been campaigning for many, many months to make sure vaccine doesn't remain as a commercial product. It should be shared by everybody. So there should not be any intellectual property right on it, so that it can be open, it can be produced anywhere in the world. But that's not how it happened. They still is surrounded by that wall, very thick wall, and profit is the only motive for that wall. As a result, vaccines, 80% of the vaccines produced went to 10 lucky countries, and remaining 20% for the rest of the world. And if you go to the poorer countries, not even 5% of the vaccine have reached. Today, if you go to Africa, entire continent, probably not even 5% of the people have been vaccinated. So the vaccine became another symbol of our selfishness, of our isolation from the world, from each other. So we don't care for each other. So this is something that we remember happening. So this is all happening here as something how human being failed in every aspect of our life. And when the pandemic was going on, from the very beginning, there's a lot of attempt to make sure that we can go back as quickly as possible to the pre-pandemic economic situation. So going back to the pre-pandemic situation of economy has become a prime objective of all governments, all businesses, and everybody else. And at that time, I've been raising a question, and I want to share it with you. I said, why do you want to go back to pre-pandemic situation? Pre-pandemic situation was no good because we are rushing towards our destruction. That's what the pre-pandemic situation is all about. Simply, we didn't notice it as much as we do now after the pandemic. So that rush to our ultimate extinction on this planet because of the global warming and many other things which we are carrying with us, and they are pushing us into the final destination of extinction. I said, in a way, human being became the most endangered species on this planet because of all the things that we did in the past. And the pandemic was a kind of a respite. Suddenly came and gave a break to all these things that was happening. The rushing to the ultimate destination has been slowed down because our economic machine is not working anymore. So I said, instead of trying to go back to pre-pandemic, our decision right now should be a firm one, very solid one, to say no going back. We don't want to go back to that rush to death. We want to go to life, not to death. So we have to find a new path of our survival, not the old path. Old path, old roads will always take us to the old destination. Old roads never take anybody to new destination. So if you want to go to new destination, we have to build new roads. So this is the time to build new roads. And I was saying that since the world is pre-pandemic world was a world of global warming, that's what was leading us to the ultimate fate of extinction. And another one, the pre-pandemic life and the world was taking us to extreme wealth concentration. Wealth of the entire world is concentrated in few hands. If you look at the income map, people are in the bottom of the income wealth map, and the wealth in the wealth map is in the way up in the sky, in possession of few people. So the 99% of the people who are at the bottom of the map, they have only 1% access to the ownership of the wealth. And the 1% of the people who are above this map, they have the control of 99% of the wealth. And that's getting worse. I said, if it continues, this will be a ticking time bomb to destroy us. Let's not pursue that. And the third one problem that is rushing us to our ultimate disaster is massive unemployment being created by artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence will take away everything that we do in this planet because we are not needed anymore. So if artificial intelligence can take over everything, human being will become a surplus on this planet and will be treated like a garbage on this planet because we have no use for anybody. So I said, I don't want to go back to that world where we become useless for the planet and everything else. So these are the things that are happening. I said, instead of continuing this path, we should be choosing a new path and build new roads to go to a new destination. And we define that destination. And I defined the destination as a destination of a 3-0 world. We create a world of 3 zeros. And 3 zeros are just the reverse of what are happening right now. So we have to reverse our path to get there. And the 3 zeros are zero carbon emission, zero wealth concentration to end poverty once for all, and zero unemployment by unleashing the power of entrepreneurship in us all. So we create that situation. We go in that direction. So this is the campaign that I've been launching and pursuing, creating a world of 3 zeros. And I'm inviting young people to join in by creating 3-0 clubs. Young people meaning 12 years to 35 years. 5 young people can get together and form a 3-0 club and pursue the point how to get to this 3-0 world and learn from each other and make up their mind. Keeping always in mind, the young people are the only one who will save this planet because there is no other option for the world. Old people will never take us to the new destination because they are not even aware of the new destination. They only know about the old roads. So the young people will become aware of the new destination and build new roads to get there. So this is the part that the COVID-19 has led us. And at the same time, while COVID-19 is going on, we have the COP26, right in the same period, 2021 in Glasgow. And it was a disaster because COP26 ended up with absolutely no commitment whatsoever. World needs much more urgent actions because the IPCC report makes it very clear. We have only 10 years to go to reach 1.5 degrees Celsius. This is their conclusion, a scientific conclusion. So that means by 2030, we'll be heading for 1.5 degrees Celsius. Today it is close to 1.2 degrees Celsius. And if we go there within 1 decade and crossing that 1.5 to 1.6 and rest will be so much easier for the system to pursue that way. And that is the red zone. Once we cross that 1.5, we have no chance of reversing the process. So we should have taken very concrete decisions to make sure we have a safe planet. We make sure 1.5 degrees Celsius we reach at the end of the century. And that's it. And from then on, our attempt will be to reduce from 1.5 to reverse the process so that we can go back to the zero temperature of 100 years back. 100 years back, we were at zero temperature. So we are coming to the extreme of 1.5 degrees Celsius. And the rest of the journey will be to reverse the process to get back to the safe environment that you should have at the 0 degree. That's the safest for the environment, safest for the human being. What happens if it is 1.5, 1.1, 1.2? I said, very simple thing, very simple logical thing. The world will be divided into two worlds right away because of the global warming. If you look at the global warming part, there'll be some unlivable part of the world, and that unlivable part of the world will become bigger and bigger. Like the first unlivable world is the island countries. These are unlivable. So people in those unlivable planets, they will be scurrying around to go to safer, livable planet, livable world, part of the world. It's very natural. Islands will go down, that people are not going down. People will be rushing around to make sure. Already the process has begun. We are not noticing it, but they are making, people in those islands are making arrangements to have the second home or the real home when this is going under. And this is going under very soon. After the islands, and come the low-lying parts of the world, which will be again become unlivable. They have to rush. So the livable part will become smaller and smaller. Unlivable part will become larger and larger. And people from unlivable part will be always looking forward and rushing towards the livable part. So that rush will gradually become a tsunami of migration, going places to save life. It's not usual migration. Usual migration is not about saving life. It's more of have a better life. It's not about better life anymore, saving life. And that will create extreme violence among people when they are desperate to keep their children safe, their families safe, just for life, nothing else. They will not care for any rule, any discipline, anything, any assurance whatsoever. They will just come. And you can start mapping out the world right now, year after year. 2022, what are the unlivable, what are the livable? 2025, livable, unlivable. 2030, livable, unlivable. You'll see it will become smaller and smaller. So the large population of the entire world has to be accommodated in the smaller and smaller world. And this will, the tension within the people-to-people tension and the violence, extreme violence, and the country-to-country, nation-to-nation violence will begin. It will be a terrible world to live. It's not just the unlivable for some people, it will be unlivable for all people. No matter, there'll be no safe place. There'll be livable place, but there'll be no safe place. That's my point. I wanted to make sure that we understand that this is the most critical thing. Decision we take now will decide the future, whether we are ending up with the violence and extinction or just be sane and take decisions so that we don't have to face that. Whole world becomes livable and peaceful and safe. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Yunus. I really appreciate some of those insights. I think they're very sobering words. I share your concern, and I think we all need to step up to do a lot more about it. Your colleague Shabir from the Yunus Center has also shared now a link through the chat to the 3-0 Club. So I encourage participants to have a look at that. That might be interested in connecting and being part of that. And I think it's great that you're engaging with youth in such a way. So I just wanted to start with a question, and if everyone could post their questions in the Q&A for Professor Yunus. Maybe I'll start with just one of my questions. Is, a lot of the focus of what business does, of what governments do, of COP26, it's all very kind of incremental a lot of the time. We're trying to kind of really sort of play at the edges of things. We're trying to make sort of minor improvements here and there, and it's not really going to get us to where we need to go towards any of the three zeros in its current state. So in your view, what can we do to really make that shift, to really be able to make transformation so things are done completely differently? And I really appreciate the work that you do with social business and with entrepreneurs, but a lot of the time these entrepreneurs, I'm sure you're familiar, and we work with a lot of social businesses as well, they're smaller startups and they're trying to find their space and they're trying to grow and to scale. But still the mainstream out there is not a social business. So how do we actually transform so that the mainstream becomes, the social business becomes the norm, that actually contributing to a positive environment, to positive social conditions, living conditions, becomes the norm rather than the outlier? How do we get there? What do we need to do to change things?
The way I felt, and you may agree or disagree, the businesses will not turn around because they are addicted to their profit, their share market, their value, their growth, and all that. Their shareholders share what they want to get. So they will make excuses. They will make lots of different kind of promises, greenwashing kind of thing. Like while we are having COP26, they are going around with trillions of dollars of investment in fossil fuel, knowing fully well this is where the whole problem lies. I was part of that campaign saying that fossil fuels should stay under the ground. It should not raise their head above the ground. This is one basic decision we have to make if you want to save the planet. It will be a little bit discomfortable in the beginning, uncomfortable at the beginning, but you save your life. They couldn't care less. And they will put trillions of dollars. And government follow the suit because government is something, again, on the side of the business because they control the politics. So government gives subsidy to the fossil fuel. While we're talking about keeping under the ground, COP26 ended up, they wanted to make it the phasing out kind of a decision. In the last moment, they were smart enough to hand it over, make it over to phase down. See, commitment gone, finished. Not even the urgency and everything. It doesn't mean anything anywhere. So this is the fossil fuel thing. And you look at the fashion industry. This is another contributor in a big way. We don't talk about fashion industry. We keep on wearing clothes the way they are. It's a lovely clothes. We want to wear it. But every time I buy new clothes, I'm contributing to the global warming. But nobody mentioned that. So recycling, reusing, these are all possible. Excellent fashion. You can do beautiful fashions with recycled products. It's not a second-hand in the sense that it's a torn down thing. It's as good as new. Only thing we have to make sure that our consumers don't buy that and companies don't push that. the new kind of varieties and so on. All the microfibers that we are introducing and all the plastic we're talking about. We are campaigning against plastic, but wearing a shirt done by microplastic fibers and so on. So these are the things. So we have to go back to the individual. That's why we're addressing the young people. We can stop that. We don't have to wait for the government. We don't put our money in a bank account, in a bank, which we check whether that bank invests money. Banks are putting trillions of dollars. If that bank puts any dollar in fossil fuel, sorry, I'm not putting my money into my bank. I have a small account, there's $1,000 account, but I'm sorry, I cannot do that to you. I'll be looking for a bank which doesn't do that. And the moment we start doing that, banks will be very cautious. Make sure that they don't do that because this is their whole business is going. So everything starts with the consumer, our choices. We have to train ourselves. That's why we're talking about the 3-0 clubs. In 3-0 clubs, we start doing that. It's not something our governments do. We'll wait for them. We put pressure on them, but we don't wait for them. We go on doing that. So I'll go back and say the young people can do that, and not that it's limited to young people, but as individual, as a responsible individual, we can save this planet and make it a beautiful planet for all of us and our future generation.
Great, thank you. I've got a question from one of the participants, Azhar Qureshi. Dear Professor Yunus, in your opinion, what have we learned from the pandemic in the context of environmental conservation and climate stabilization? Or have we learned anything?
Yes, we have learned a lot. This is my starting point. I said we learned that we are selfish. We are islands. Island and environment doesn't go together. Environment is something we've got to, this is our collective problem. It's not my problem. I cannot control climate in my island by my own work, because the climate depends on a collective thing all over. So we say when all the chips are down, when the real picture emerged, we said there is no global village, and that's the most dangerous thing. Global system didn't function. The multilateral system didn't function. Everybody is talking about their own countries, how to save their own people and so on. And they are busy with their own. And when the G7 countries get together, they talk about what they're doing for themselves. And they're the rest of the country, okay, we'll donate. So donate vaccines. That's the only solution they found. And 2 billion dosages they promised. Not even 10% of the 2 billion has been delivered so far. So this is again a promise. And the 1 year is about to finish on the vaccine situation. It still is not going. Still, they have not made that decision. Allow the vaccine to be produced everywhere. It could be produced anywhere. So I'm saying that this is something that this is the learning process that we discovered ourselves. We discovered our governments. We have discovered our businesses. We discovered our strength, what we can do.
No, and I think I should share that point. We're in this a lot of developed countries. We're in the rounds of having booster shots now, when there's still so much of the
Imagine that. Booster shot is, yes, okay, you do the booster shot. Throw away vaccines because the time expired. Warehouse. We're talking about hoarding of vaccines. That was the thing. In the beginning, you remember we were talking about big countries, or the 10 countries buying up 5 times as many vaccines as their population. Where did the vaccine go? And you still have them in the warehouse lying around and gradually giving a little bit here, a little bit there, without touching the basic, and you're throwing away vaccines.
Yeah, it's a challenge. I've got a bit of a different question here from another participant, Sonia Kanji, who's a Syrian businesswoman. Said that we've had war for 10 years, 2 years of pandemic and sanctions. Do you have a suggestion for a way or an economical model to return to a pre-war situation and a pre-pandemic situation? I think you made the point we don't want to return to a pre-pandemic situation, but I think this is a very sort of unique case for countries like Syria. But do you have any suggestion for communities in that situation where they've had war, where they've had sort of a number of impacts between the pandemic and war and climate and everything that's sort of doubling up on many poorer countries? How are there any sort of economical models, ways forward that you think that can help these countries to sort of rebuild in a more sustainable way?
Well, this is basically a political issue. It's not economic as much. Big countries want to decide what the fate of the other countries should be, and their own self-interest will decide where other nations, other people will have a life of safety and security and their normal, quote unquote, normal life to go along with their families and so on. So this is something that we have not been able to cope with, because the rich countries and the powerful countries will decide the fate of the rest of the world. And Syria, Iraq, these are examples of that, how big countries decide the fate of the other people, whatever reasons they have. There is all their own interest, what their geopolitical interest is all about. Within that, we have to find a way how to survive. And then we have to build our own economy within that situation. I cannot help change that situation. Of course, we, as a human being around the world, we raise our voices. Like this is not limited to Iraq and Syria and other countries in Palestine. Rohingya in Bangladesh, people just pushed away. They're living there for centuries. Now suddenly they say, you don't belong to us, and pushed to the neighboring countries, Bangladesh, 1 million people. Now that we have to, and with the support of the global, support, we have to feed and keep them. Bangladesh is already a packed country with people. It's the most densely populated country in the whole world. 1 million extra people coming in, it makes it the tipping point that you lose your balance and everything. Anyway, what I'm saying, we have to build our own life. And all I can say that don't follow the same old way of lifestyle that which created all these things situation. So we go back to a new kind of situation that we are talking about, a new economic system where we'll be emphasizing on the social business to solve problems rather than make money. It's under this situation where if you're trying to make money, elbowing out everybody else, you make it worse. So this is a good situation to create social business to solve problems, so that we as a community, we help each other create a system. It's an economic system, but it works differently than the rest of the world. So it's an opportunity to do that. And this I mentioned in the context of COVID-19 also. COVID-19 is a disaster. I said it's a wonderful opportunity at the same time. Let's not miss this opportunity to redesign. So Iraq and Syria is also can be seen as an opportunity to move away from the older system to create a new system for their own families, own communities, and do it differently than others have done.
Absolutely, absolutely. Another question here from Åsa Alfsdotter. Professor Yunus, in your opinion, what is the best way of improving food production and distribution to the poor? Bad land management is an enormous climate problem, and I know that in Bangladesh you're facing many issues with the soil and the land and flooding.
Everything. Everything.
You probably have a lot.
Fertilizer, pesticide, you name it, salinity, everything is here. So it's the same old stuff. Because it's a global warming will push Bangladeshi people to move away from Bangladesh because they have no future for them. Because our land mass is a very low lying, very close to the sea level. Almost 1/3 of the country is slightly over 1 meter above the sea level. So you can imagine what it is. If the sea level rises, gradually we slide inside the ocean. And what happens to all those packed people? They move themselves to safer place, as I was explaining. And this process will not be limited to Bangladesh. This will be global. So agriculture is a fundamental thing. We have to change our food habits. That's very simple. We have to change the way we grow food. We have grown food without any concern for the climate and everything else. And there came the artificial fertilizer, ruin our soil condition. And there came the methane gas production. And methane gas is the most dangerous gas than carbon itself. So how do we do? And decent agriculture can be done. It's not something impossible, but big companies have to make money by selling their fertilizer, insecticides, and all other things, and telling you how you can have a multiplied yield from your production by using their products and so on. So we have to get away from that. We have to go back to find out which are safe products, how to make it happen, how close we can get back to the natural processes so that we can grow things in a natural way. We do not destroy the planet on which we grow.
Thank you. Another question here from Armin Bauer. There's so much whitewashing on what inclusive business is. Would it be necessary to establish clearer definitions, emphasizing solutions for base of the pyramid rather than their engagement? Would any accreditation system help in clarifying and avoid doing things which are not relevant for the poor?
The way I have been promoting and my view on that and my experience, sharing my experience on that, is as long as you have the core of business as profit maximization, if that is the core, no matter how you try to stop it, you cannot do that. Somewhere they will come and they'll say sweet words here, sweet words there. You call it whitewashing, greenwashing, or whatever it is, but the core will not change. They want to make money, as simple as that. As long as they want to maximize their profit, they will keep on destroying everything because the only thing they see is money. Only thing they smell is money. They cannot see that. They are blind. They have no sense of feeling for anything, and then they create that problem. So I was saying that that's the wrong way of interpreting human being, that human beings are driven by self-interest. All this idea about profit maximization came from the definition of human being used in economics. And that definition is human beings are by nature is driven by self-interest. I mean, otherwise, human beings are a selfish being. I said that's absolutely wrong fundamentally. Human beings may be driven by self-interest partially, but overwhelmingly driven by collective interest. We want to solve our collective problems. So it will be a combination of self-interest and collective interest in each human being. Not some people are self-interest driven, some people are collective interest driven. I'm not saying that. I'm saying each human being has both elements. Then we have to have a new kind of business. Already one kind of business exists, which is profit maximizing business, self-interest business. And the new business, which is collective interest driven business, is a business where you don't want to make money. You want to solve problems. That's your business, to solving problems without any intention of benefiting personally. And that's what we keep calling a social business. So that we can, as a person, I can create profit maximizing business. At the same time, I can create social business. When I want to address the problem of food for saving the planet, I go to the social business. Because if I go through the self-interest driven mode, profit maximizing mode, I'll immediately bring everything which will destroy the planet. So I have to stay away from that. I want to go to this one. If I want to address the problem of poverty, poverty can be addressed in a business way, but not in the profit maximizing business way. It's a social business way. And I said we need to change the entire financial system, because financial system is driven exclusively, like in everything else, on profit maximization. So that profit maximization drove the banking system to go to the richer and richest people, because that's where the maximum profit is. They don't go to the poor people because there's no profit there, or very small profit. Why should I go to the small profit when I get more profit? So they will naturally move up the ladder and serve the rich. I said, if you want to reach the poor people and address their poverty problem, you have to create social business banking system. So you have to have bank for profit maximization and bank for social business. Social business bank, like Grameen Bank. Grameen Bank is a social business bank. It doesn't want to make profit for some person from somewhere to the shareholders and make money out of that. And that's not the intention. So when we talk about microcredit, genuine microcredit that we created was a microcredit as a social business. We don't want to make money out of that. So this is how it can, and it can be done on food, it can be done in education, it can be done in healthcare. We are now talking about creating social business pharmaceutical company. Seeing that what is terrible thing happening in the pharmaceutical company, maximization of profit and holding on to their intellectual property right. We said, why don't we create social business pharmaceutical company? We'll produce the vaccine, not to make money, but to reach out as many people as possible, as cheap as possible, make it be at the cost price, because we don't want to make money. And that's what the solution is. So we have to redesign our thinking process, we redesign our structural process, and we have to change our education system where we can teach that there are two options to you. You can become a profit maximizer. At the same time, you can become a social business person to solve the problem that you see in front of you. Any problem can be solved with social business design. It's a question of designing a business. How do you address that? Is it healthcare? Is it housing? Is it poverty? And I keep reminding, poverty is not created by the person, the poor person. Poverty is created by the system. If you change the system, poverty will not exist. It will disappear. You don't need to go to the poor people, feed him, clothe him, give him education. It's not it. You change the system. She knows how to handle her life. She's equipped as a human being to handle all her problems. But you change the system. Today you put him and put her in chains. She cannot move. He cannot do anything because system says you stay there. Only thing you can do, you work for somebody. I said, why should you work for somebody? You are an entrepreneur, you're a born entrepreneur. Go and create entrepreneurship, but you need financing, but the finance will not come. So we create social business financing system. So the finance will come and I change myself into an entrepreneur.
Great. Thank you very much, Professor Yunus.
Thank you.
I think I'm all up for that. I hope this is something we can try to do today. I hope this gives us the opportunity, some food for thought, and that we all take the opportunity to really move things forward with social business, with a greater respect for the environment, and to change the system, because I do very much agree the system is broken.
Absolutely.
So thank you very much. It was a real pleasure and real pleasure seeing you after all these years.
Thank you. It's good to see you.
Making time in your busy schedule today.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Okay, so thanks a lot for that. Well, I know we had some more questions coming up, but unfortunately we have to stick to a schedule. We're running a little bit over time, so let's keep moving forward. I'm very happy to introduce our next guest, Vanessa Erogbogbo, who's the Chief of Sustainable and Inclusive Value Chains at the International Trade Center. We had a representative of the International Trade Center join before, and they've always been very insightful and brought a lot of good points to the discussion. Vanessa's been working with a few different programs, including the She Trades programs, Green to Compete, and the Trade for Sustainable Development. Have over 20 years of experience in trade and the private sector, and I think there's a lot we can learn from her today. So welcome, Vanessa.
Hello, good morning. Great to be here with you today, Mike, and everyone.
Thank you. Very welcome.
I think Professor Yunus, I was just listening in, he's a tough act to follow, such a lot of wisdom that he conveyed.
Yes, he definitely is, but I'm sure you'll do a great job.
I'm pleased to be here today. The topic, future-proofing value chains, I thought was timely, important, and very relevant. A quick intro to ITC, to the International Trade Center. We are the Joint Technical Assistance Agency of the United Nations and the World Trade Organization, supporting the internationalization of SMEs. As you mentioned, I oversee a section that promotes environmental sustainability, gender inclusion, and social responsibility in value chains. But today, I really wanted to focus on the environmental sustainability part. Over the past year, we've seen the devastating health impact of the pandemic. They've washed over us wave after wave, and businesses and governments, many of us as well have been left grappling with its deleterious economic impact, in turn exacerbated by what the Secretary General of the United Nations calls the triple planetary crisis: climate change, pollution, and biodiversity loss, threatening our economies and our societies and undermining the natural systems that not only we, but also future generations depend on. We know intellectually that climate-related disasters impact food prices, food security, human health, and productivity. And we understand intellectually that without urgent action, climate change could push a further 130 million people into poverty by 2030, wipe 18% of global GDP by 2050, and cause over 200 million people to migrate by 2050. And we're also aware intellectually that biodiversity loss is reducing crop yields, fish catches, and is contributing to flooding and other climate change impacts. And it also puts human health at risk. For supply chains, all of this means more frequent disruptions and constrained output and trade flows. Rising temperatures are leading to declining agricultural yields and increased incidence of pests and disease, as well as threatening product safety and quality. Less directly, climate hazards are threatening livelihoods and food security of local communities that are dependent on tradable sectors like agriculture. Meanwhile, manufacturing firms are facing higher operating costs due to, amongst other things, changing energy requirements, limited availability of raw materials, delayed logistics. Unreliable supplies of water and energy may also halt production and cause sudden declines in productivity. Processing facilities may also be damaged by weather extremes such as hurricanes, and at the lower end of the supply chain, direct damage to roads, port infrastructure delays times to market, impeding firms from timely meeting demand. And beyond these physical risks, we've seen that firms operating in domestic, regional, and global value chains face numerous transition risks as policy measures and investment regulations evolve to address the challenges posed by our planetary crises, ranging from environmental commitments in free trade agreements to growing discussion of carbon border adjustment mechanisms to mitigate cross-border carbon leakage. And similarly, the need to comply with market requirements typically governed by private sustainability standards, and sometimes even a combination of the two, as in the recent Swiss-Indonesian Free Trade Agreement, which uses a private standard, the RSPO, to enforce sustainability requirements in palm oil exports from Indonesia to Switzerland. These are immense challenges, yet I am 100% certain that intellectually they're surmountable, and that not only can we overcome them, but that we can do so relatively swiftly. 2 weeks ago, I had the privilege of going to Glasgow to attend COP26, and that experience had a really profound effect on me. Tens of thousands of people coming together to debate and discuss what we must do to arrest our impact on the planet that's threatening our very existence. Tens of thousands of us understanding full well, intellectually, the intolerable costs of not doing enough, yet not fully prepared to accept the necessary changes required. I must say the young activists being the unquestionable exception for me. There in Glasgow, I understood that we're faced not with an intellectual challenge, but rather shortcomings in imagination. In 1992, the first commercial text message was sent out. And here we are, less than 30 years later. I mean, think about that, thousands of miles apart, speaking to each other, seeing each other in real time, as if it were nothing, without any effort. Imagine over half a century ago, before Stephen Hawking's Big Bang Theory, before the creation of the humble pocket calculator and the basic idea of the internet, we put a man on the moon. In Greek mythology, Kairos was the personification of opportunity, luck, and favorable moments. Depicted with only one lock of hair and wings on his feet to fly like the wind, he could easily be seized by his lock of hair as he arrived. But once he passed by, he couldn't be grabbed as the back of his head was bald. Which brings me to what I really want to say today. It's fantastic that businesses like the thousands of MSMEs that ITC works with are choosing to go green by adapting to the changing climate, adopting more circular and sustainable production processes, and pursuing nature-positive models. Examples range from modern irrigation systems to cold storage facilities, to certified agricultural goods, to environmental advisory services. The changes they're making are leading to annual savings of water, energy, resources, and lowering of carbon emissions. And these changes are in turn improving their resilience, improving their resource efficiency, and consequently lowering costs, as well as opening up new markets. I'm not saying it's easy. It's a challenging journey, and this is why ITC, through our Green to Compete initiative, supports developing countries through the green transition, working to align trade-related policies, increase capacity and green competitiveness of MSMEs, and improve the ecosystem in which they operate, thus future-proofing value chains. But to balance the multi-pronged scale that weighs economic development needs, historic harm done to the environment, current GHG emissions, vulnerability, and many more considerations, perhaps we need to reimagine future value chains. I was reminded in Glasgow that we need more heart than smart, a willingness to challenge our beliefs and copious amounts of curiosity. I wanted to say to you today that climate change represents the biggest market opportunity, but we have to imagine it, we have to create it, and then we have to harness it. But like the opportunity to grab Kara's lock of hair, this moment could be fleeting. So to conclude, let me share with you 3 actionable observations. First, I can assure you firsthand that there's no shortage of good ideas. We were surprised to receive 650 applications to our maiden Youth Ecopreneur Awards launched this summer. These are 650 businesses run by young people, tackling the energy crisis through off-grid energy solutions, managing waste and turning it into value, and improving water use. And these young people come from everywhere, with 9 finalists from Morocco to Pakistan, to Dominican Republic, to Rwanda, to Indonesia, to Uganda, and beyond. I'm not going to invite you. I was going to invite you to join us, but I will let you know that it's this afternoon. I'm not inviting you because it would be rude to come here and draw you away from this excellent event and the networking that will take place this afternoon. But I'm sure that you can watch the awards after the session through the ITC's YouTube channel. Second, these ideas, these good ideas that exist, are not the monopoly of advanced economies and come from businesses in countries at all levels of economic development. In developed economies, people usually have access to financial services through an array of institutions. However, this is not the case in developing countries. And when people are financially excluded, they're vulnerable to market shocks and rely on cash, which is less efficient, costlier to store, and more dangerous to transport. In the early 2000s, this changed when the transformational innovation that is mobile money arrived. Today, $2 billion of transactions are processed daily, and there are 9.1 million registered agents, the vast majority in developing countries. 4.4 million of those 9.1 million agents are in Africa. In Kenya, mobile money payment facilities are accessible to 90% of the adult population. And this inclusivity is crucial for ensuring in the sphere of environmental innovations that they're fit for purpose for all, and that businesses everywhere can reap rewards from innovation thereby contributing to sustainable economic development needs in all corners of the world. And I have to say here, I was listening to a podcast last week, and someone was saying that during the course of 2020, global carbon emissions only reduced by some 6%. Imagine the effort that we put into getting such a small result. Millions of people died. The whole world shut down, and that only led to a 6% reduction in global carbon emissions. So for me, innovation is at the center of taking ourselves out of the hole that we find ourselves in. And then third, we humans have the capacity to change. I took part in a British reality TV show. You may have heard of it, Come Dine With Me. 5 contestants cook for each other every day and score each other, competing for a cash prize of £1,000 and their dignity. I didn't win one and I lost the other. For an appetizer, I served pan-fried salted grasshoppers, a dietary staple in my native Uganda, but a novelty experience for my witting and my unwitting dinner guests. And never could I have imagined that I'd be able to pick up a bag of bugs in the crisps and nuts aisle as a snack from my local supermarket here in Switzerland, just 10 years later. Insect farming compared to livestock production requires less land and water, results in lower GHG emissions, and can be used as animal and aqua feed, amongst many environmental benefits. So to conclude, I wanted to say that as one of the most innovative countries in the world, Sweden has produced world-beating companies that have and continuously seek new approaches to building a more inclusive and sustainable world. Today, this experience of commercializing good ideas is at a premium, and I invite you all to join us in partnering with MSMEs in developing countries to commercialize their good idea. They need technical support to further develop their products. They need investment to scale their businesses. They need visibility and networks. They need clients, and most of all, they need partnerships. With that, I thank you.
Thank you very much, Vanessa. That was great, very insightful, and also very concrete about what's needed in order to move forward. It was very nice to hear also about what ITC is doing in this space in so many different areas. We are going to hold off on questions now, just so the other participants know. We're going to have the three speakers speak, then we're going to have them back as a panel. So we'll thank Vanessa for now and have her stay online so that she can answer questions later on. So as mentioned before, if everyone can make sure to post the questions in the Q&A, not the chat, so that they can be prioritized. And also, if you can, since we have 3 speakers, if you can just direct in the Q&A, just direct your questions to which speaker you would like that question asked, if it is one of the speakers, specifically one of the speakers that you'd like that question directed to. But now we're going to move on and introduce Rebecca Marmot. She is the head of Unilever's sustainability strategy and implementation globally. Is going to be speaking on paving the path towards social justice through inclusive and sustainable value chains. So Unilever, a large organization, has quite a network of value chains in quite a number of countries. So it'll be good to get the insights of what they're doing with value chains. Rebecca heads a lot of external engagement with different partners for improving the climate, health, and social priority areas. So we welcome Rebecca today.
Hi, Mike. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. Thanks very much for inviting me today. And thanks to Vanessa. I thought that was really interesting. It was great to listen to her. So thank you very much. So I have been asked just to speak for a few minutes around the other side of sustainability, to what Vanessa was talking about. That was more focused on environmental, to look at paving the path towards social justice and thinking about inclusive and sustainable value chains, very much focusing on the social area. So just by way of introduction, we all know, and there's been lots of talk already in this forum, that inequality has been growing. It's more widespread than ever. It's been exacerbated by the pandemic, and it destroys trust in institutions, including, can you hear me, sorry? Hello? Can you hear me, Mike?
Yes.
Oh, yes, it destroys trust in institutions, including business, and the Edelman Trust Barometer, which comes out at periodic times during the year, reports that trust is at an all-time low, despite economic growth starting to pick up in a number of countries post the pandemic. A fractious society, those current trends are widening social divides rather than narrowing them. Within countries, income inequality is worsening for more than 70% of the world's population, which, as we heard Vanessa talking about, is only going to get worse, with climate change disproportionately affecting some of the most disadvantaged communities around the world. And it's holding back economic progress. 1.7 billion adults are still unbanked, of which 56% are women. And that limiting access to life-changing check to services is blocking the route further to economic growth. Our societies were already fragmented and segmented, broken up by race, by age, by gender before the pandemic. And that pandemic has really showed how stark the divides are, and it's further spurred inequality. So global billionaire wealth increased by $3.9 trillion over that period last year, whereas global workers' combined earnings fell by the same amount, just under 3.7 trillion. And in the meantime, stakeholder pressure to act is undoubtedly on the rise. We've seen a real rush of cultural movements, hashtag Time's Up, the Me Too campaign, Black Lives Matters, showing that people are on the move and they don't want to wait for traditional institutions to change the world. They want to see action taking place now. And about 2/3 of people, 63%, want brands to focus on making the world a better place. There's a massive opportunity and responsibility for brands to really emphasize and put their efforts and energies and align themselves with programs on the ground that are tackling the most important environmental and social issues. Gen Z in particular have absolutely no tolerance for brands that are portraying, for example, outdated gender norms. And attracting and retaining top talent in companies, we see all the time this at Unilever, is really correlated to how well businesses conduct themselves on taking a stance on these important issues. So what have we done around this at Unilever? So Unilever, we have a long history, a proud history of driving social change. So not only through our portfolio and targets around improving the health and well-being for more than 1 billion people, but also looking at what we can do through our value chain to enhance the livelihoods of the millions and billions of people that we touch. So as a consumer goods company, we've committed to use our size, so the 2.5 billion consumers around the world that are using our products every day, the 165,000 employees that we have spread across 190 countries in the world, use our size and influence our resources to make sure that we can contribute to a fairer and more socially inclusive world. So it's a different way of doing business, starting on our own operations, but then working through our extended value chain, through our brands, and through the connections that we have in the wider world to really bring around transformational change. So the strategy that we have is called our Compass. So it's an integrated sustainability and business plan. So not sustainability sitting on the side with the core of the business operating separately, but very much embedded at the heart of what we're doing. And picking up on the conversation from the last session, and I heard Professor Yunus talking about this, we know that if we do that, that helps to grow our business, but in a sustainable way that is much more equitable for all of the different stakeholders that we're touching. And all of the Compass is underpinned by a commitment to human rights. That's absolutely first and foremost, and something that we're driving through our supply chain, through things like the responsible sourcing policy. So the social part of the Compass that I wanted to really focus on today is centered around 3 areas. The first is around raising living standards. So that's thinking about economic inclusion in our value chain. The second is what can we do around creating opportunities through inclusivity, so the equity, diversity and inclusion agendas. And then thirdly, preparing people for the future of work. So our own people dealing with change, dealing with automation, dealing with a rapidly changing environment in work and the communities that we're operating in around the world. And the way that we approach that, as I said, is in 4 stages, starting with our own operations, then our supply chain, then through our brands, and then through wider society at large. So if I take, for example, raising living standards, and I take that value chain approach, what does that look like? Well, of course, firstly, and most importantly, as I said, it's getting our own house in order, seeing the change that we want to see. So if we think about what that means with raising living standards, of course, that means starting with ensuring all our employees around the world were being paid a living wage. That's not a national level of salary. That means a living wage so that they can afford decent standards of living, that they're able to provide for all the needs of their family, providing education opportunities, really thinking about how we can ensure that we go beyond what and we heard Vanessa talking about this, is often just provided as a national wage in many markets. Secondly, thinking about what we do across our value chain. So we've expanded that living wage commitment and living income commitment to everyone who directly provides goods and services to Unilever. So that means starting with the smallholder farmers who are growing the raw commodities that we're using in our products. So for example, if I think about the vanilla farmers that we work with in Madagascar, we've worked now for a number of years on the Vanilla for Change project with Simrise, our supplier partner, Save the Children and GIZ, impacting now 50,000 people by looking at climate smart agricultural techniques, agroforestry, and being able to mitigate the more volatile impacts of climate change. We've committed to spend $2 billion annually, €2 billion annually with diverse suppliers. And of course, that means different things in different countries. So sometimes that might be suppliers managed and owned by a whole group of different diverse or marginalized communities across many different countries. So that can be ethnic groups, LGBTQI plus community, might be people with disabilities, and supporting them through a supplier development program, working with our biggest suppliers to ensure as well that they are driving diversity in their own supplier base. This summer, for example, we had an annual Partner for Purpose event where we've got 450 of our top suppliers to also commit to the diverse supplier promise. And lots of them have already signed up. Here in the UK, we're working together with Google, Dow, WPP, with MSD UK. We've launched an accelerator program to really empower diverse businesses. In Kenya, we're working with IFC on Sourcing to Equal. It's a 3-year project looking at small women-owned businesses, helping them to access bigger corporate procurement opportunities. And then the other end of our supply chain, when we think about retailers, we're working at the moment to get 5 million SMEs connected up through digital skills, technology, and finance. We already reached just under 2 million with the first stage of our work, the Unilever Sustainable Living Plan, and now we're building on that to make sure that we get up to 5. So lots of work again in partnerships. I heard Vanessa talking about the power of partnerships and how important that is. So groups like the CEO Partnership for Economic Inclusion, working across banking, across fintech, across telco, and of course with others in the FMCG sector. The kinds of programs that means is, for example, something we're doing with MasterCard in Kenya, where we're providing interest-free digital credit to small-scale retailers. It's called Jazaduka. So enabling them to grow their business and at the same time ensure that they have access into that formal financial digital economy. And then what's really important is being able to understand how we're impacting those small scale retailers. So we've been working with 60 decibels on what they call their lean data approach. And we've seen now that 86% of retailers in Jazaduka are able now to grow their business. They've got a much better sense of their store inventory. They're able to buy and sell more of the essential items that Unilever is working to provide them with every day. So soaps, washing detergents, etc. Similar program we're working on in the Philippines as well. We've seen 87% of small scale retailers growing their business, generating greater revenue, which they're then putting back into their local communities. The third area I talked about is what can we do through our brands by thinking about the social lens when we're looking at the impact that the brand can have. So for example, our Walls ice cream brand has been working with ice cream vendors, particularly young people coming into the world of work. We've created 45,000 jobs in 20 different countries for long-term unemployed, particularly young people. Sundial Brands has set up the New Voices Fund, so $100 million to empower women of color entrepreneurs to be able to grow their own businesses and enable them to build and reach their full potential. Ben & Jerry's is making their value chain a lot more sustainable by applying a so-called smart mix of critical productivity drivers. So thinking about how do they change their purchasing practice, how do they diversify income to a wider selection of different suppliers. And Ben & Jerry's, of course, already committed to paying the living income reference price with 37 different cooperatives that they're working with. And then the last change that I talked about is in wider society, so through industry groups and cross-sectoral alliances. So the role of public sector and civil society in raising the floor on living standards and living wage is hugely, hugely important. I've talked about the work that we've done with 450 of our biggest suppliers, but it's also about engaging and working through industry platforms like the UN Global Compact or the Business for Inclusive Growth. Here in the UK, it's the Living Wage Foundation, setting up the living wage community of practitioners, which is now expanding beyond the UK and into other markets. And as I mentioned at the beginning with COVID, we've seen more and more platforms and organizations really trying to tackle social equity and inclusion on top of their agenda. It is daunting. There is a huge amount for us to do. Paying living wages is challenging. You're dependent on working with others across the supply chain. You need to work with governments across multiple countries to ensure that that becomes legislation. Also, just coming back from Glasgow and at the COP and following on from what Vanessa was talking about as well, it's critical that we recognise the interlinkages between the environment and the social commitment. So we've been looking, we have a whole raft of commitments around climate, around nature, around waste, at applying a social justice lens across those environmental commitments. So for example, if we're looking at the work we're doing on a deforestation-free supply chain, an absolute key unlock for that is working through the smallholder farmers, ensuring they have access to living wage, really thinking about how do we work with the livelihoods of the farmers in the communities where we're doing our sourcing. And that's the same right across the range of our environmental commitments, the same with nature, thinking about regeneration, working with farmers to ensure that they're at the centre of these programmes. So in closing, we know and we've seen that government can't close persistent inclusion and equality gaps on their own, neither can business. Exactly as Vanessa said, it's really about building these partnerships for inclusive and sustainable value chains together. At Unilever, that's meant working with a different kind of business model, completely looking at what we do from, as I said, those 4 stages right the way across our value chain. I urge everybody to think about how they can also adopt those kind of changes across their business and move towards a sustainable and equitable future for everybody. Thanks very much.
Great. Thank you very much, Rebecca. Really appreciated to hear what you're doing with Unilever. I'm familiar with a lot of the work that Unilever has done with value chains and with inclusive business over the years. So good to get a little bit of an update on that. I'm sure with such a large organization, it's a big ship to steer, and that takes time. But it's good to see that you're moving forward. We'll ask Rebecca to hang on for some questions later on. So please feel free to keep posting your questions and make sure to direct them in the Q&A to the right person. But next we're going to come back to Gothenburg here and introduce Maria Munther from Icebug. We've actually been working with Maria for quite a few months now, working with Maria and Icebug's value chains as part of the Inclusive Ventures program. Very happy that you can join us here today and share a little bit about how you're working in this space. So thank you, Maria. I believe you have a PowerPoint you're going to share.
Yeah. Thank you, Mike. I will try to share my screen now. Let's hope it works as it should.
Looking good.
It looks good. Okay, great. And now something happened here. So can you see the big screen now?
That's better.
Great. Thank you, Mike. I'm very happy to be part of this event. I will talk now. It's something. I will cancel this one. Yeah. I will talk about how we at Icebug try to scale up impact by collaboration. But first, a few words about our business. The core of Icebug's business is to make shoes with a good grip, inspiring people to get out more and connect to nature all year around. And our vision is to be a change maker to contribute to make the footwear industry fully sustainable. So how can we as a small company make any difference here? Shoes are physical products that use resources and leave ecological footprints. However, most people need shoes to protect their feet. We encourage people to only buy the shoes they really need and to make them last a long time. The shoe to the left was made in 2015, the year that Icebug kickstarted the sustainability work. It had only standard materials, and that is also the case for actually most shoes on the market today. Since then, we have replaced many standard materials with more sustainable ones. Actually, many of Icebug styles do look pretty similar for several years. We are not fashion-based, and we have many carryover styles between seasons. And that allows us to always sell what we produce and avoid the overproduction that is so common in the fashion industry. We seldom do concept projects, but we apply the sustainability changes to all the collections to get maximum impact. And this picture shows the overall change to more sustainable materials. We have replaced virgin materials with recycled ones, and today we use a total of 25% of recycled materials. We want to use more bio-based materials to get away from the dependency on fossil. And today we use 16% of the total. We also use low impact materials with less use of energy, water, and chemicals. And those three together contribute at different degrees to the climate emissions. And in total, we have a reduction of 10% during these years. And our average shoe today has 11.6 kilo carbon dioxide equivalents. We also work on the style level to show the customers what the particular shoe that they buy, what the footprints they have. We show that by a QR code that they can scan, and they can see the footprint and also see where the product is produced. So how do we know the data? We are using a simplified life cycle assessment to calculate the carbon footprint. And we have a platform called TrustTrace that helps us keeping track of materials and certification and processes. And of course, this is not an exact science, but we develop the method regularly, and we also display it in public to discuss and to get feedback from other brands. I talked about materials, but as you can see in this footprint, the energy from the manufacturing is a big part of our climate emissions. So this leads us to the first collaboration project concerning solar energy on assembly factories. Icebug align with the science-based targets to stay below 1.5 degrees global warming. And we have committed to reducing 50% until 2030. And we want to have 50% renewable energy on our factories by next year. After that, we will halve the emissions each decade towards net zero 2050. So far, we have reduced 10% in average per style. And we have a couple of measures ongoing that will lead us to around 30%, we hope, in the next following years. But we have only reduced 4% on total production so far as our volumes grow. So we have a challenge here to reduce the total carbon emissions while growing and taking market shares. This is one reason why we think it's important to do collaboration projects to scale the impact. We really believe in the power of collaboration, and our physical sustainability impact is proportional to our turnover and the size. And by communicating and sharing, we could influence beyond our size. So I'll give you 2 examples of collaboration projects. The first is a rooftop solar project in Vietnam. We reached out to our assembly factories and our sole producer, and we asked the factories to provide rooftop area for installation, and the solar energy provider will own the solar equipment. We team up with Clean Energy Investment Agency that supports a program to do feasibility studies and to set up the whole procurement process. The feasibility studies so far for these 2 factories that you see on the map here shows a really high potential with up to 67% reduction of climate emissions, while also getting cheaper energy than before. It has been a bit delayed due to the COVID, but we hope that the solar panels will be installed by beginning of next year, or at least the first half of next year. And here you see Icebug's total carbon emissions this year, around 4,000 ton carbon dioxide equivalents. To the right here, or in the middle, you see the savings of the potential savings of the 2 factories that are most relevant right now. And this is nearly the same as our total emissions, so it's quite substantial reduction. And to the right, you can see Icebug's share of this reduction, what we can put in our account, because we are a small customer to these big factories. And the rest of the saving is made for other brands. So this is an example of scaling up by collaboration. Next one is a project that we are doing with Inclusive Business Sweden. It's sourcing of FSC certified natural rubber from Thailand. And FSC stands for Forest Stewardship Council. Forests and biodiversity are a high priority for Icebug, and it seems natural to us that our products should also contribute to biodiversity and other sustainability aspects where the raw material is sourced. So the core in our offer is to have good traction and good soles. And in our outsoles, we have pretty much natural rubber that we want to source sustainably. We want to source all our bio-based materials and others as well sustainably, and to get higher biodiversity, hopefully reduce the climate impact, and also regarding the social conditions for the farmers. And FSC is well recognized among the Nordic consumers that are our main target group. Inclusive Business Sweden made a small benchmarking evaluation of different certification systems, and we found that FSC would suit us good for this project. FSC is a multi-stakeholder organization that sets standards for both the ecological and the social aspects of the forestry. And when we first started to look for FSC certified rubber, it was quite difficult. We could only find it from Guatemala in big plantations, and we wanted it closer to our production in Vietnam. We approached FSC International that told us about smallholder farmers in Thailand that were actually recently certified, but there were no footwear quality, so we didn't really have it was not on the shelf for us to buy, so to say. And FSC made us aware of the bottlenecks, and also that it's important to balance between the demand and the supply chain side to make scale up possible. The value chain, sorry, I forgot. Yeah, well, in this case, it seemed to us that collaboration between brands could be a good solution. And at the same time, Inclusive Business reached out with a proposal that they could contribute in leading such a project. So we started a pilot in the beginning of this year. And the value chain looks like this. To the left, you see the smallholder farmers cooperative in Thailand that were already certified with help from WWF, and I think IKEA was there also helping them. But we didn't have any processor to make the liquid latex into footwear quality. So this was a missing link. And at Icebug to the right here, we had the demand from our side, and we thought we would have demand from other footwear brands as well. So our sole producer was really fast and FSC certified this summer. Our assembly factory is ongoing. Icebug as a brand is also in the process, and some of our retailers are already certified. So we hope that we pretty soon will have a whole chain with FSC certified partners. In this project, we invited other brands to encourage the supply side of the chain to dare to take the steps to continue with this. So the project is about balancing the demand and the supply. We want to motivate the farmers to go on and making sustainably forestry. We also wanted to motivate the processor to make footwear quality that is also FSC certified. So we invited other footwear brands and we got really good interest. So 25 brands attended the information meeting, among them quite big ones as well. And when we have followed up, 6 brands have answered with forecasts and show a clear interest. And together they are planning to buy 15,000 tons in 2 years' time, which is pretty close to the capacity of the processor. So this is a really good match that I think can motivate the processor to take these steps. Of this, Icebug has tiny volumes, and we had 17 tons back in 2020. So this is also showing that even if we are small, we can help scaling the impact. We looked at some critical factors in this project. First, we need brands that will get market benefits from the FSC rubber. We need a local supply initiative that in this case was already in place, farmers that see the win in sustainably managed forest. We need some sustainability credibility, and in this case we have FSC and also Inclusive Business Sweden that are neutral parts and with the sustainability interest in focus. We also need some coordination of the value chain parties, and this is not really easy to find maybe. So here we were happy to get the support from Inclusive Business Sweden to make this possible. Another thing that is critical is that we should have no market control. We cannot have cooperation about prices or commercial terms. All the business relations between the parties has to be as usual, also from a legal aspect. We were happy to have Corey McCall Europe as a business partner. They were very familiar with this value chain and they could support different parties in the value chain and also take some initial risk to help the processor get started. And to make this value chain complete, Icebug got some good support from FSC to do the certification. The smallholder farmers got support from WWF and from IKEA. And I think this is important to get the value chain complete to start really doing the business. And trust is really the key here to make companies on the demand side trusting each other to be able to share information. At least some of the partners need to share also their forecast, and they did in this case. Icebug has taken a clear position, and we believe it's crucial to collaborate. We also see that the outdoor community has some tradition on this that is maybe not that common yet in the fashion industry, but we hope this will develop so that we can continue collaborations. So this afternoon, we will have a workshop discussing the critical factors further, so you are welcome to join us. And I think many value chains, especially of bio-based materials, will have the same challenges as we had here. Thank you for listening and for being a part of this event.
Thank you very much, Maria. Appreciate that, and I think that it's been a pleasure working with you over the months, and I think this is a great example of what we might call competitive collaboration. A lot of the businesses that we have in attendance are businesses and do compete, but there are a lot of things that are in our, for our mutual benefit that we can be doing more collaboratively together. And this is also a little bit of the thinking around the call to action this afternoon, where different actors can work together in all of the call to actions, where different actors can work together in areas which make sense. But thank you very much. So now what we're going to do is we're going to have questions for the three panelists. Of course, 1 second, just getting the technology working. So keep posting your questions. If it's to all, you can just post the question. If it's to a specific person, please just note that person there. But I'd like to start off with a question that, for all three of you, if I may, and that is, to what extent, when we're talking about supply chains, and we talk about, social challenges and opportunities, and we talk about environmental challenges and opportunities. And when we work with suppliers, the question is, how do we actually try to work to shift the way our suppliers work, the way the actors in the supply chain, how they can work in a different way to become more sustainable and inclusive? Mohammed Yunus talked before about the need to sort of change the system. And how do we get beyond an incremental change to really actually change things in the supply chain, so that our suppliers become more along the lines of social businesses rather than more traditional businesses that are just trying to do things in an incremental way? So if we could have Vanessa, Rebecca, Maria, just giving a quick answer to that.
Very interesting question, Mike. I'll jump in. I think for us, one of the areas that we also work on is the policy area. So really pushing trade policy, which is the scope of our work, really pushing trade policy to align with some of these other policies, whether it be social policies or environmental policies, and to provide policy type incentives for businesses to move in that direction. Another way that we do that is, and I'm giving you just a few concrete things that we do, is working with institutional ecosystems. So whether that's financial institutions or business support organizations, to really equip them and give them no excuse for not supporting this move by suppliers. And then two more. Third is helping suppliers build the business case, because of course, you need to be environmentally sustainable, socially responsible, inclusive, etc. But without economic sustainability, then it all falls apart. And finally, very much working with lead firms such as the Unilevers of this world to help bridge any gaps that might be between them and their suppliers.
Thank you, Vanessa.
Thanks, Mike. Just but building on from what Vanessa said, I totally agree. It's very much around working with your suppliers and creating the shared business case to make a change. So I talked a little bit about some of the work that we've been doing on, for example, living wage. And we had a partner event over the summer where we went into a lot of detail around both the climate and nature commitments that Unilever had made, also the work that we're doing together on fairer and more socially inclusive world. And what we've done now is looked at how can we work towards achieving those commitments together. So for example, if we think about the commitments we've made and many others in FMCG around deforestation-free supply chain across those crops and commodities that need to be sourced in a sustainable way. So palm or paper and board, tea, soy, cocoa, crops and commodities like that. If you work with your suppliers to set up a proper sustainable supply chain, it's much more effective for the farmers that you're working with. And of course, you're negating negative environmental impact. You're actually putting the farmers at the center of helping to source and work in a different way. On regenerative agriculture, absolutely critical for us to be working with the farmers and with the communities, for example, where we're doing our sourcing. We launched €1 billion Climate and Nature Fund last year to help Unilever to achieve the climate and nature commitments that we've set out. But we'll only do that by working collaboratively with our suppliers to ensure that the programs that we're setting up, they're involved with and they're building from the beginning. And then of course, on the social side, I talked a bit about some of the work that we're already doing on living wage. We're getting our own suppliers to commit to that too, so that it will have a knock-on effect right the way through the supply chain. I talked about the work that we're doing around diversifying our own procurement spread, so bringing in more diverse suppliers into our own value chains. So I think you've got to sit down together and align on the targets or the commitments or the areas that you want to focus on, set out what that business chain looks like, and then also look at what other partners do you need to bring in. So it might be, for example, we're looking at this with the Climate and Nature Fund, you might be looking at blended finance options. It's important to think about governments and legislation. It's really important, for example, lots of conversations around carbon tax. We need to see governments leveling the playing field, introducing and looking at how we can ensure that it's not just the more progressive, responsible companies that are operating our businesses and working in a different way, but that everybody is. So yeah, I agree totally, Vanessa, finding that business case and then working towards a sustainable long-term strategy to operate and work in a different way.
Yeah, we also work a lot with the long-term strategy, and we are a really small company, of course. And we are a small company and we are a bit of a forerunner doing this in our industry, meaning that we are often the first ones asking the questions to our suppliers about kind of difficult things for them sometimes. So we really need to make them see that this is the future and we make it difficult for you now, but if you can do this, you will have a better position for the future. And now they start to be happy to see that they are in a better position in many ways. And they can take new customers that are having the same requirements for them. So, and we have long partnerships with our main suppliers to also educate to some extent.
Great, thank you very much, everyone. Got another question here from Aunad Bonasoli. What do you think of certification models to support production area and mitigate risks for the supply chain? For many actors, it is impossible to support directly the producers due to the distance between end users and the initial producers. I am, for instance, thinking about the derivative sector in the palm oil supply chain. Any thoughts on that?
Shall I give a couple of thoughts to start?
Please.
So certification methods are good, but they aren't enough because, you know, they've been around for decades and we've seen that we've not been able to, it's impossible to certify every single producer. Maybe just to give you a sense of how we, you know, what we're doing and, you know, some ideas needed on evolving how we make sure that production is sustainable everywhere. One of the programs that I oversee called the Trade for Sustainable Development Program is actually a program that focuses purely on sustainability standards. We have a database that covers 300 sustainability standards and covering 1,600 criteria ranging from human rights to workers' rights to environmental sustainability and so on and so forth, anti-corruption and so on. And what this database allows is companies to actually go in, to diagnose, to self-certify, and we also build tailored specific tools working with the bulk of industry. So for example, in the textiles and apparel industry, we're working on the social and labor convergence program, and 40% of global textiles brands are represented on that. So you can imagine the amount of impact that makes. And what we're doing with them is helping them make their supply chains more transparent, giving them information coming from the factories that are producing their garments on the audits of the working conditions of garment workers in those factories. So it's a bit of both. It's a mixed solution. Much more capacity building is required on the ground. We need to find cost-effective ways and the competence on the ground to really spread this out to every single, even smaller micro MSME, which is challenging, I confess.
Yeah, I think, as Vanessa was saying, I think that the certification at the beginning of a journey, I think, can be very helpful, and it's often a good way to engage companies in some of the issues that might be happening in their supply chain. So I think the process of an audit or understanding what you're trying to change in the supply chain, and therefore working with the right kind of certification and verification body to ensure that those changes have been made, is a good starting point. But I absolutely agree, it's not enough. I think Unilever over the years has worked with a number of different certification agencies. And I think if you're trying to identify or fix a particular issue, perhaps I think on the environmental side, that it's a great opportunity and it's a great starting point, and it provides a stamp and seal of authority to consumers to know that a product has been through a certain process. But I think in our experience, we found that it's not enough. You need to go much further. So I think traditionally, a lot of the certification bodies tended to focus more on the environmental sides of sustainability, and it may perhaps be around a particular issue around water or around sustainable sourcing or a particular technical aspect. And of course, if you want to really have a sustainable product, then it's much, much more important to take a holistic view. I think technology is changing quite a lot. Increasingly, we start to see, for example, barcodes or blockchain technology being introduced on consumer products. So consumers can go in store, they can zap a QR code, and they start to see different stages in the supply chain. So I think that increasing transparency is really important, and it actually pushes companies to go beyond that traditional level of certification. So there's much more transparency right across the supply chain. I think probably the last thing that I say, and again, I think this is a really positive shift, and we saw talk about this at the COP a couple of weeks ago, is you see movements now from groups like IFRS or from the IBC, the Business Council of the World Economic Forum, to try and bring in a much more standardized approach to non-financial reporting. So actually, it will be much easier for different stakeholders to be able to look certainly at some larger companies and be able to understand and see what they're doing in a whole range of different areas around non-financial metrics. So it could be around living wage, it could be around materials, it could be around their environmental commitments, it could be about progress on net zero. And I think having that standardized reporting system on non-financial metrics will also, I think, really help everybody to go beyond that traditional certification. So yeah, I'd say it's great as a starting point, but I think we probably need to do more.
Yeah, it's a broad question, and I'm not sure if I fully understood it, but we are working a lot with different certifications in the materials, and but we try to gather it for the consumer to be easier to grip with, doing indicators that sometimes we group together several certifications and explain it in another way to the customer. And another thing about certification, we are a member of Fairware Foundation, doing social certifications of the factories. And we have seen that there have been some audit fatigue in our factories. So we are happy to, in Fairware, different brands can share audits with each other. So that's really another way of collaboration, but that we think is good to help the suppliers not getting overloaded by audits.
Thank you very much. Okay, so in summary, certification's good, but not enough. Good. Okay, I have a question here for Vanessa. Climate change is very crucial to food production. To maximize food production, currently using chemical fertilizers is the best option, which of course have a negative impact on the climate. How can we go about this? What can we do about it? Any insights there, Vanessa?
You know, when you come to these panels, you feel like, I don't know, my answer may not be what you want to hear or 100% right. And look, the chemical fertilizers may seem like the best way immediately, but in the long term, obviously, they're detrimental. So the way we like to approach this challenge of the impact of climate change on agricultural productivities on two fronts, we see it as an income issue and as a food security issue. So it's a matter of addressing how we farm to maximize the on-farm productivity over the long term. And so in some of our projects in Ghana and in the Caribbean, we've been working with farmers to implement climate smart approaches such as dynamic agroforestry and really replacing the forestry and the trees on the farm. Apologies. I'm supposed to be in two meetings at the same time. Secondly, farming to promote food security. So working a lot with farmers on crop diversity, again in Ghana, where the main focus was initially on cocoa, in addition to planting those trees. Getting farmers to multi-crop so that, even with the fluctuation of commodity prices, there's still some food security. And then the third is on thinking more in terms of where does value get added. Of course, it's productivity on the farm, but it's also in value addition, processing, marketing, branding, exports, trade, and looking at where the balance of the value can come from. So I would say take a broader perspective on this and look at other ways in which value can be created for the product.
Great, thank you very much, Vanessa. I know. Having participated in other panels, that you're expected to be an expert on everything. So, but I think you did a very good job answering that question. We'll move across to a question to Rebecca. It's a little bit of a tricky one, Rebecca, so I'll see how you go. And it's from Azhar Qureshi. How much percentage of your profits at Unilever is invested in corporate social responsibility as part of social and environmental development?
So it's an important question, but the way that we approach sustainability at Unilever is perhaps a little bit different to some of the other companies that you might be following. So since we've launched the Compass and we've got sustainability right now at the heart of our business plan, we don't have a separate philanthropy team or philanthropy department. So rarely does Unilever just write a check. What we've tried to do is to integrate the way that we work, so economic and health and well-being and social, into the heart of everything that we're doing in the business. So as an example, during the pandemic recently, Unilever launched a program together with the UK government called the Hygiene and Behaviour Change Coalition. where we reached 1 billion people through developing a hygiene campaign, hands, face, space and surface that we put together that was working to raise awareness about the importance of key hygiene behaviours in the COVID pandemic. We worked to put that into 30 languages. We put it out across 18 countries. We've reached 1.3 billion people. We installed 500,000 hand washing stations. We trained up 150,000 community health workers. We gave away more than 75 million Unilever hygiene products, so bleaches, soaps, sanitizers, etc., across 60 different countries, working with a whole network of different partners, NGOs and governments around the world. All the work that we've done, for example, on brands like Dove over the years, where we've really focused on self-esteem. We've created programs and materials where we reached hundreds of thousands of young girls. We've just recently launched the Crown fund across a number of markets, started in the US, but it's now just been launched in the UK, to help and invest in Black-led grassroots organisations to help to eliminate barriers to progress for women and girls who are often stigmatised because they want to wear their hair in a natural way. And we use the power and the reach of brands like Dove to really try and change the conversation around stereotyping and breaking down those stereotypes. So when we launch a programme, we take an integrated approach right the way across the advertising, the marketing, the partnerships that we're investing in across the ground. So often it can be a financial contribution. It can also be so many other things. It can be technical assistance. It can be working with organisations. We talked, for example, about integrating smaller businesses into our procurement spend. And we've put all of the work that we're doing on sustainability into the core governance structure for Unilever as well. So it's integrated right the way from the board all the way through the business. 25% of management bonuses are dependent upon Unilever reaching certain sustainability criteria, and that's right the way across the board. Some of those commitments are in the environmental space, some on social, some on health and well-being, and we go through a verification process with the board to see how Unilever is progressing on those targets, and then that influences pay for Unilever managers right the way across the world. So it's not really a case of just writing a check, it's integrating sustainability into every single thing that we're doing through the products, through the innovation process, through the partnerships that we have on the ground, and then making sure that we're really able to leverage and scale that through things like the marketing and advertising.
There's a follow-on question. So you mentioned 1.2 billion people. I think there's 2.3 billion people who lack access to adequate sanitation. So what are you going to do for the rest? No,
you're absolutely right. There's always more that we can do. I think the reason that we worked with the government on the Hygiene and Behaviour Change Coalition was because over the years we have done an awful lot of work. So prior to the pandemic started, Unilever had worked over the past 10 years through our Lifebuoy brand and through our Domestos brands. We'd reached 1 billion people by creating hygiene and behaviour change programs. So we worked with London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine to create a hand washing program that encourages people to wash their hands at 5 key points during the day. We've done a similar program working on Domestos. So we worked with Prime Minister Modi's government in India on the Swachh Bharat campaign, looking at how could we integrate behaviour change programs around practicing better sanitation, so using a toilet or practicing good hygiene behaviour change programs so that we could encourage people to wash their hands at those 5 key points during the day, or to use the toilet, and help to provide access to toilets through working with local entrepreneurs, because we know that prevention is, and we all know this on the call, is so much more impactful. Still around the world, more children and young babies die from dysentery and diarrhea, which is preventable if you've got access to hand washing and sanitation facilities, than TB, HIV, AIDS or typhoid combined. So absolutely critical. So the kinds of work that we've done in reaching 1 billion people with the hand washing program, or working with UNICEF, working in India on providing access to and improving understanding and education around things like sanitation program, I think are absolutely key to why we set up the Hygiene and Behaviour Change Coalition. But absolutely right, still masses more to do. We're trying to do that through partners like London School, through partners like Yunus are looking at what we can continue to do. And I think as well, we've all seen this, with the pandemic, of course, and understandably, there's been a focus very much on the direct issues that are connected into that. But hygiene is critically important, together with universal access to vaccination, to ensure that we can continue to try and contain COVID. And that continued focus on hygiene is even more important for people who haven't yet had the opportunity to get access into the vaccine. So we've also done a lot of work in terms of advocacy and lobbying to make sure that water, sanitation and hygiene stays high on government agendas, even at the moment when perhaps understandably their attention might be diverted into other areas of the health sector.
Thank you. So I've got a question for Maria here from Azhar Qureshi, who just jumped around. What does your company mean by sustainable shoes when a lot of plastics are also used as an ingredient? How do you ensure the alternative to plastic materials can be used in your products?
Yeah, well, I agree that there is no sustainable shoe. So we are talking about more sustainable shoes, and we go into that direction. And what we mean is that we want to move away from fossils. So we are using increasingly more bio-based materials, but it takes time to get the quality right, because there are not that many bio-based materials. Well, there are some, but I mean, to get for the whole industry, we need to develop more materials that are also really high durability. So we are always working to look at new materials that are bio-based, and also that are sustainable in the way I told about the FSC project, because when you move into bio-based materials, you really need to secure the sourcing is sustainable. And that is a bit more tricky than to buy fossil fabrics from the shelf. So that's where we need to go, engaging more in the value chains. And that's a challenge for the future. And I think that's where we need to collaborate between brands as well.
Thank you. Thank you. There was a couple of comments that have come up in the Q&A here, and also touching on what Professor Yunus shared with us before, this kind of, I guess, tension between profit and sustainability and having social and environmental impacts. I mean, to what extent do your businesses, or some of the businesses you work with, in your case, Vanessa, do things that are, if you like, absolutely against their profit imperative, but they're willing to do for a greater good? Because I think it's nice, it's always nice and easy to say that we do things for the environment, social, and they also have a benefit for our brand, a benefit for our communities, for our business, and can actually contribute to the bottom line, can contribute towards how our customers see us. But are there any cases where there are things that this is absolutely not in our profit imperative, but we need to do them anyway, so that we do them? Or do you always try to connect the two? Or do your businesses always try to connect the two?
For Icebug, we have a couple of things that are, well, firstly, I must say that to be able to make a difference, Icebug need to have some profit to be able to do new projects and so on. So of course we need to have a profit and be a successful business. But we do a couple of things. We are part of 1% for the planet. So we commit to donating 1% of the turnover to projects that are to sustainability, and most sustainability NGOs is mostly the partners there. And for instance, when it's Black Friday this week, we are giving the whole turnover from that day, not only the profit, but the turnover of that day we give to protect natural old forests in Sweden and in Norway and in Germany as well. And I feel that the owners of Icebug that are leading the company are really committed to sustainability. So it's really in the DNA of the company. And it's a genuine urgency that we feel, because we are working with ice. we are dependent well, our shoes are against slipping on ice. So we also do a lot to protect the winters, which is also, of course, connected to the business. But I mean, we really feel that this is an urgency that we're all in together. We need to do things, even if it doesn't give us any profit.
I was going to say that, sorry, Will. I was going to say that, I think actually small businesses have big hearts. And perhaps that's because the owners are closer to their staff and they're closer to their customers. So I could give you any number of anecdotes where, the way that these businesses have acted goes completely against, is counterintuitive. Last year in the pandemic, we had a business in Ghana in self-care, soap, etc., lotions and so on. And despite the shutdown of her factory, she continued to pay her staff. She wasn't earning any income for her business, and she was still paying her staff their salaries. And this wasn't, government-supported salaries. This was her own business savings. In Mongolia, a business setting up a creche and childcare facility to make it easier for the workers to manage and balance their, care responsibilities. The list is long. So I think it comes naturally somehow to small businesses. And I think that's where I have a lot of hope. And I think, I mentioned before that we're not intellectually challenged, but we're much more imaginatively challenged. I think I have hope because I can see that there is so much good happening.
I love, Maria, by the way, what you're doing on Black Friday. I think that's really cool. I would say at Unilever, what we've tried to do is move away from what I think is sometimes a bit of a polarizing, sort of slightly dangerous conversation about is it either or. And actually, I would say, Mike, for us, it is both. So we developed a piece of work a few years ago called the Growth, Cost, Risk, Trust Matrix, which is really the lens that we use when we're looking at making sustainability investments. So there's always going to be instances where a business does something because it is the right thing to do. And, responsible and progressive businesses, of course, are going to do that. But actually what we've tried to look at is the longer term sustained impact of changing the way that we operate the business. So we see when we put sustainability front and center of our brands, those brands grow more quickly. So brands like Dove resonate with consumers because consumers increasingly, particularly young people, want to buy goods or services from companies that are tackling issues that are important to them, and increasingly actually don't want to buy from companies that aren't doing that. I think the trust part's hugely important. Certainly when it comes to attracting and retaining talent, I think it's massively, massively important. But sometimes there might be instances where you're investing in a sustainable choice, and actually it's not about short-term growth. You're not going to see the payback on that for many quarters, maybe years. When I think about some of the work that we've done on investing in sustainable sourcing, it can take 4, 5, 6, 7 years for that to actually start to reap rewards. But it's around guaranteeing security of supply in the future, making sure that we're able to continue sourcing crops or commodities, that the growing patterns are changing because, for example, climate change, and investing in the farmers that we're working with and investing in local communities. And then sometimes actually, surprisingly, and I think more progressive companies, will realize this, sometimes actually sustainability saves money. We've saved nearly €1 billion swapping to renewable energy infrastructure over the past 8 years at Unilever. So sometimes it just makes more sense and it is cost effective. But I think it's very much about shifting from short term into thinking about longer term gain. And of course, not all companies are in a financial position to be able to do that. So that's particularly as well where partnerships come in and looking at things like blended finance opportunities.
Great, thank you very much. We're just out of time, but I would like one last quick question with a really quick answer, and it's a hypothetical, okay? So a hypothetical situation, you're having a conversation with a supplier that you're talking about how important it is to you and your organization to have an inclusive and sustainable supply chain. And they say to you, look, we can't prioritize social standards, employee standards, or the environment. We need to actually keep the price down. Otherwise, we're going to have too many of our customers leaving us. What do you say to these companies? What advice do you give?
So Unilever, there are certain non-negotiables for us around environmental and social responsibility, which are part of our supplier code of conduct. So there are certain areas where we wouldn't be able to work with a supplier. However, on things like, for example, the commitment to living wage, we've said that we want all of our suppliers to be paying living wage, but we've said by 2030, and we'll work with our suppliers from now over the next few years to help them and enable them to change the way that they're doing their business, they're operating their businesses, so that we can bring them with us on the journey. Because I think excluding people immediately is not the way to bring everybody forward. It's not the way to uplift the business world. But as I said at the beginning, there are certain non-negotiables where we wouldn't be able to work with a company if they were contravening really important environmental or social policy.
And I will build on what Rebecca just said, and I'll say we say to them, quite simply put, you'll be locked out of accessing markets in the long run. So better to make that investment now and make sure that you can keep on supplying those that you supply today and find new business as well.
Yeah, I agree. We need to convince them that it's future-proofing to to really do this work. And well, if they are not really agreeing, we have to find other suppliers. I mean, but first give them a chance to jump on the train.
That's great. Thank you very much for your answers. We're out of time, but really appreciate all the insights and you sharing really concrete examples of how you're working with your supply chains and how you're working with some of the social and environmental challenges we're facing today. So thanks a lot for sharing the time, and I'm sure that a lot of the participants have got a lot out of this, a lot of inspiration and a lot of insight as to what we can do to really move things forward in the space. So thank you very much. Welcome. I'm very happy to introduce Preeti Sinha, the Executive Secretary at the United Nations Capital Development Fund. Preeti has over 30 years experience as an investment and development banker, served as CEO of FFD Financing for Development, focusing on the Sustainable Development Goal agenda. Has worked in 45 or more countries, and will be particularly introducing an alliance that the UN Capital Development Fund has made with local food supply chains, which is very relevant to the theme of the forum today. I can also say that the Innovations Against Poverty program that we are running, we've been working with UNCDF for the last year or so. UNCDF is one of the strategic investment partners of Innovations Against Poverty, and working to support some of the businesses in the portfolio there. So we really appreciate the contribution that UNCDF makes to that. So welcome, Preeti. I'll let you go for it. And
Thank you.
sorry, as usual, please post your questions in the Q&A box.
Thank you very much, Mike, and I'm delighted to be here. I've been told that I can speak for about 15 minutes, which seemed long to me, but I hope I can make it interesting for you. So please join me in this a mutual panel here, where I just tell you some of the exciting work we feel that we're doing in the frontier markets, in development, in the last mile. So with that, greetings to all. Good afternoon. Hope you had your fika out in Sweden, which is a little bit of a cake and coffee. So I trust you all found today's forum to be inspiring, innovative, and impactful. Before I get into my remarks, let me extend my deepest note of congratulations to the Inclusive Business Sweden, along with the Inclusive Ventures and Innovations Against Poverty, for today's Inclusive Business Forum. Today's forum is just another proof point regarding Sweden's long-standing role as the world's humanitarian superpower. And just to say, I was in Sweden, in Stockholm, just a couple of weeks ago, where we had wonderful discussions with your colleagues at SIDA and in MFA and other parties to talk about this exact role. In this vein, again, I would be remiss if I did not briefly discuss the long-term and long-time impactful relationship that UN Capital Development Fund, the UNCDF, has shared with Sweden, the government of Sweden. Sweden stands today as our largest donor of core and non-core funding, which means that they are not only essential to supporting our mission of serving as the UN's catalytic flagship financing agency for the world's 46 least developed countries, but they are together in our journey as we develop in the future our new strategic framework in which we address this kind of inclusive, green, diversified economies that we'd like to see our countries whom we serve head towards. Let me use my remarks to extend my appreciation to the Swedish Foreign Ministry, the Swedish International Development Cooperation Agency, the SIDA, the Swedish Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and most of all, the people of Sweden. We truly appreciate your partnership. Together, we are assuming the mantle of leadership on advancing the achievement of the SDG agenda in the world's LDCs. These are called the least developed countries, the classification by the United Nations, to recognize the great need for development in these countries, but along with our mission to stand by them, to partner with them as they go along this mission of development. This is a very interesting topic of aligning food systems, the value chain. However, let me start my remarks by a quote given by none other than Professor Muhammad Yunus on receiving the Nobel Peace Prize. He said, just in brief, and then I'll move on to the content of my speech, he said, I'm in favor of strengthening the freedom of the market. At the same time, I'm very unhappy about the conceptual restrictions imposed on the players in the market. This originates from the assumptions that entrepreneurs are one-dimensional human beings who are dedicated to one mission in their business lives, to maximize profits. This interpretation of capitalism insulates the entrepreneurs from all political, emotional, social, spiritual, environmental dimensions of their lives. This was done perhaps to create a simplification, but it stripped away the very essentials of human life. So this is a remarkable meditation on capitalism, on global finance, and on the free market. Professor Yunus, as you know, a widely held Nobel Peace Prize winner and widely regarded, is explicitly stating this is not what we should think of free market capitalism, when the players are restricted to deliver only value based on the return on investment and profit. This is not free market capitalism. This is the very antithesis of free market capitalism. It is the antithesis because interested investors in a truly free market should be both incentivized and enabled to leverage the capital to deliver on both commercial and development returns. Market players should be positioned and empowered to deliver gains for both shareholders and stakeholders. And perhaps most importantly, all the actors in such a free market system should be motivated and encouraged to leverage the commercial and development power of their capital to support a global financial architecture that avoids financing market failures, not one that directly finances them. So this is a bit of reflection, I thought, since this is such a deep and profound inclusive business forum, that we could share some reflections on those. So how can we achieve this kind of free market capitalism? It requires providing the right incentives to the market players. However, we know a financial architecture is not just made up of actors, it's also made up of systems. And in that way, the market players require incentives to deliver on the commercial and impact, the development impact. The systems of these markets require innovation that can allow the entrepreneurs to provide that capital and development impact. Therefore, this takes me now to the work of our organization, the UN Capital Development Fund, where we hope, and we have some very valued colleagues from around the world, we hope all together, all of us are leveraging the development impact of capital to serve the least developed countries in their journeys towards green, inclusive, and digital and enabled economies. So here at CDF, we pilot and we deploy innovations that unlock that both commercial and development potential in the market systems, the value chains, and particularly the food value chain, speaking precisely to this meeting today, and the ethos of innovation that UNCDF defines. So now we come to the core of our message, just that prologue that led into this message. The vision of UNCDF is to leverage, as I said, the development impact of capital. We are able to achieve this mission through the use of our unique capital mandate at the United Nations, which allows us to use a full range of products that start from grants and technical assistance, which we've done over historical times. It was set up in 1966 by the member states. However, by now, we offer loans, guarantees, blended funds, and bonds. These are all very valuable tools and instruments of delivering financing, particularly development financing, to where it's needed the most. Therefore, we believe that UNCDF operates as a hybrid development agency and a development finance agency. This means that we look at our unique capital mandate to combine all those kinds of instruments to deliver that value to the food systems, to the last miles, to the value chains. So because we have this mandate, and our mandate also encourages us to serve the last mile, last frontier countries, we really look at the local level. So the local level is very important to us. We feel that's where you can reach the people for whom the SDGs were built and for whom they are being implemented. And at the local level, we bring together both the public sector, that's the subnational level, the city level, the community level, the business actors, civil society, and the communities that I mentioned, which have been traditionally underserved, both by the global financial architecture and their own local economies. Therefore, the critical importance of UNCDF, and we saw some of that at the recent COP26 as well, we have perhaps one of the only local mechanisms for climate adaptation at the local level, which we put through the subnational basis to help countries. So while the big figures were being talked about in a global context, we deliver locally. We do, of course, encounter multiple structural impediments, including low levels of productive capacity, undiversified economies, but those sometimes heavily reliant on agriculture, natural resources. Only 53% of the LDC population of about 1 billion people has access to energy, which goes as low as 10%, or I heard even 2% in some rural areas in some countries. Can you imagine in this day and age to not have electricity, which powers so much of our lives, the other parts of our lives? And of course, we hope that electricity will be renewable and green. And the lack of digital infrastructure and the lack of women's economic empowerment further prevent many economies from transforming and seizing their true potential. And these are being compounded by threats of climate change, biodiversity loss, and currently the pandemic, unfortunately. So in the COVID-19, the LDC's economies really shrunk in 2020 as external debt burdens and debt service obligations rose dramatically. The cumulative result of these structural and situational challenges is that the number of people living in LDCs in extreme poverty increased by more than 32 million people, wiping out decades of gains over poverty eradication. So this set of circumstances, unfortunately, has resulted in systemic fragilities that we are all witnessing. The fragilities in our global and local value chains, notably those that underline our food systems. Such fragilities not only impact the SMEs and individuals who are essential in these value chains, but more importantly, they affect the local communities' aspirations and their existence as prospective engines of inclusive growth and economic resilience in the real economy. Therefore, building value chains that support inclusivity and resilience as well as performance implies the right mix of financing instrument at affordable rates along the entire value chain. Such financing instruments must work in building inclusion and resilience as well as the localization of the SDGs, which is pretty much a framework for basic standards of living. It's a framework for human life, and as we imagine and hope it will be led. The SDGs and that framework in the value chains also serves to sustain peace, especially in the fragile context where we are seeing, unfortunately, fragility, conflict rising as well. I was just seeing a number today, unfortunately, in the country of Afghanistan, the WFP predicts there will be 22.8 million people facing acute hunger over the winter. So we can all agree that improving and strengthening resilient and future-oriented food system value chains is not only key to securing long-term business success, to advancing economic resilience at the local level, it is also essential that this decade, this time, despite the adversities, continues on its track. At least at the United Nations, we can drive that, and we hope you'll all partner with us to make it the decade of action for implementation of the SDGs and not the lost decade of development, which many of us fear could emerge if we did not all come together. And therefore, being here at this Inclusive Business Forum is highly critical to have like-minded people, like-minded players coming together. So some promising news. The promising news is the UNCDF's expertise has demonstrated that our innovative finance solutions can indeed make food value chains more inclusive by bringing together a wide array of actors and linkages, more resilient by strengthening their responsiveness to shocks and natural hazards, and more impactful by enabling greater access for the last mile communities. I'd like to offer 3 concrete examples of the methods that UNCDF deploys to strengthen and future-proof food system value chains in markets that we work in, especially positioning blended finance for these value chain actors that will unlock lifelines of both concessional and non-concessional capital. That's public capital and private capital. I share these examples in the hope that they will inspire other actors here and elsewhere to respond similarly as a way of inviting interested partners to partner with UNCDF in this important effort. So one of the examples, we hear that there is hunger for projects that can deliver the double bottom line. But identifying such projects, making them both bankable and impactful, requires a real understanding of the ground level. The blended finance approach is one such approach, as you may know, which also combines the public and private capital. It's got the public capital as a first loss, as a guarantee to the private capital that comes in on top. So in our creation of these projects that I'd be talking about, we use not only this concept of blended finance that brings public and private capital together, we also use a dual key system pipeline. So we are very actively, as CDF, developing the pipeline on the ground. And when we look at a project, we look at whether it has both a financial and a development impact. Therefore, our analysis of the dual key pipeline brings to you then a set of projects then we are convinced have both commercial and an ESG impact. Today, roughly 50 food system value chains have passed through UNCDF's dual key system, receiving both technical and financial support and making them ready for greater finance. I would be remiss to my colleagues in the team if I did not mention that the dual key system also received an honorable mention from the SME Finance Forum at the IFC for the best product innovation. Another aspect of building these examples is digitalization. Digitalization in the space of agriculture, which means providing access to capital to SMEs, smallholder farmers, through things like alternative credit scoring, leveraging digital data, digital verification of identifications. All of these are in some ways linked to the whole process of mobile money, which itself is a value chain. And this helps farmers access capital more steadily in a more secured manner. So in that sense, let me tell you one example in Uganda. In Uganda, there was a coffee exporter who worked with 6,000 farmers, smallholder farmers, who brought him coffee, which he exported. We believe that instead of 6,000 farmers trekking across to deliver their product, get their payments, it would be better if he could do digital payments to these 6,000 farmers. For that purpose, we needed a tower to connect to create the internet connectivity for the mobiles. And the local telecom provider did not believe that there would be offtake and did not believe it was a sound business proposal. So we went ahead and we issued a 100,000 guarantee to the local telco, who then put up a tower at that cost. And soon, behold, we saw, after working with another company to distribute kind of an entrepreneurial company, Uganda, to distribute SIM cards and phones, we saw that about 25% there was an uptake immediately amongst the coffee farmers. And within 3 years, more than 50% had adopted that methodology, therefore leading to much more stable, much more regular payments. And the national average, compared to the national average, that was about 25% more than national average in adopting that technology. We've now seen that the telco has gone ahead and installed several more towers. So this is one example of a value chain coming together, a number of farmers coalescing into an export market, the role of digitization. So I think that's perhaps a good example. Other examples are digital credit to dairy farmers in Nepal, eKYC for farmers in Tanzania. When we do that, then they can get access to local bank credit as well. And finally, also traceability aspects in the value chain. So several examples emerge, and we are looking forward to working with several of you in explaining our work on the blended finance and therefore bringing that to market. We have a specialist team called the Least Developed Countries Investment Platform, where we therefore source these investment opportunities. We have a blended fund, it's called Build. We have a $250 million fund based out of Luxembourg, managed by an impact manager in partnership with us called Bamboo Capital. And we therefore invest in these kinds of value chains and food value chains. We also have on-balance sheet facility called the Bridge Facility, where we can give loans and guarantees from our own balance sheet. And therefore, we have been working with various food-producing entrepreneurs in Tanzania, Uganda, Malawi. Just so coming to a second example, in Malawi, there was a woman who aspired to create groundnut paste and products from raw groundnut. She was unable to access any kind of credit from the local economy. So something that UNCDF could do, we call it our investment continuum. In some cases, we are able to give a grant and a technical assistance to an entrepreneur to even help them create their business plan, create a plan out of their idea, their vision, and that helps that early takeoff. And there are very few development finance players who are able to reach that last mile or able to do what we call high risk, high impact activities. So once, for example, this woman entrepreneur had her business plan, we then proceed to give her a loan, which is concessional, it's a bit softer, from our balance sheet, that's the Bridge Facility. And once she's repaid that back 2 or 3 times, she's established enough credit history for her to then go to the local domestic banks and then establish a credit history with them. So these are the typical access points for capital in creating a food value chain. And there are others, of course, including private equity, impact investment on the equity side, but that's the ecosystem. So we feel quite proud of our work in the investment continuum, making sure some of these entrepreneurs, they take off. And that's where I believe the bulk of the livelihood creation happens, needs to happen, could happen. That's where these 80% of the informal markets of these countries lie. So we must ask the question, are the development dollars really reaching the last mile? Or are they now, is it a time to pause, given COVID's impact on livelihoods, to see whether now development could include really getting entrepreneurs off the ground in the last mile? So I think a lot of things have been said. Let me mention, since June of this year, the Least Developed Countries Investment Platform, which I spoke about, has been providing mentorship support to 2 companies from the Innovation Against Poverty Challenge Fund, which you spoke about, Mike, which launched by SIDA with the aim of helping these companies become investment ready and on the path to achieving scale along the models that I just spoke about in our investment continuum. One company in this challenge is an Ethiopian cook stove manufacturing company. And we really believe in the value of cook stoves, both for biodiversity preservation, for carbon, for health reasons. And the other one is a woman-led agri-food enterprise in Zambia. In Zambia, we're focused a lot on women enterprises in agriculture. We are creating as well an MSME guarantee fund there. What that will enable is that we would give a guarantee to local banks and financial institutions for them to then on-lend to the entrepreneurs. I'm looking at the time. As I said, I have been given 15 minutes and lots of more interesting things to say, but Mike, maybe I'll stop here to have time for any discussions. Thank you so much for your kind attention.
Thanks very much, Preeti. It was no problem at all. We don't mind going over when there's such interesting insights and interesting things to hear about. So thanks very much. It's great to hear what UNCDF is doing, and particularly with the less developed countries. Obviously, there's a massive need for capital. And it's great to see that you're really sort of engaging with agri-businesses, even at the last mile, and with helping to make value chains more sustainable. One question that I have just to start off with is, you mentioned COP early, and we've talked about sort of agri-food and so forth. But one of the things that came up earlier today is, and that has been a significant focus at COP, was the need for forests as part of the climate solution, and the importance of not just limiting deforestation, but reforestation, and also making sure that we can protect our forests while being able to produce the food that's needed for the world's population. So what is the role the UNCDF has when it comes to enabling sustainable and productive forests and biodiversity?
Thank you, Mike. That's a topic of great passion personally for me. But let me give you a specific example. So we are working with the government of Kenya on a tree growing fund. The government of Kenya has decided to plant at least 2 billion trees to increase their green cover to more than 10%. And so what, in every such situation, what we offer the financing, structuring expertise to add to the intention, the vision. So here we are, the UN, with some partner agencies like UNDP, UNEP, FAO, but all together we're coming together, and our role at CDF would be to help them raise funding for this 2 billion planting of trees. So this was discussed at COP, then to introduce them to obviously value of the carbon market. Also we've been talking about a concept of nature performance bonds. So can these countries issue sovereign bonds where they could have some results-based metrics, and if they achieve those kind of climate or nature-based solutions, that the interest rate goes down on the bonds. So looking at creative ways, bringing us, other private sector, social entrepreneurs in terms of nurseries, they need a lot of nurseries as well. So that would be something I'd be proud to talk about.
Great, thank you. We have a couple of questions in the Q&A. One comes from an anonymous attendee. Actually, two come from an anonymous attendee. I don't know if it's the same anonymous attendee. So in countries where there is much corruption, do you really feel like you're able to achieve your goal by distributing funds while you know for sure that it won't serve the purpose? I'm reading the question literally here. But you must have some sort of concerns about that and ways of addressing that.
Well, I would, some of our other agencies, such as UNDP, has a mandate on governance. Yes, before this role, I also served at the African Development Bank as well for 6 years. So, and I'm very familiar with developing markets. I think what we are doing at CDF at this moment, we are working more with the private sector. And there we are able to monitor our funds, of course, and we are a bit more project focused. So this is not a sort of the deployment of large funding, at a sovereign level. It's a very specific project program level funding. We do work with the government, of course, but at the subnational level, where we do our municipal financing. And there as well, performance-based grants. So there is sort of a strong reporting element. Yes, I would encourage developing and developed countries, and overall generally that the role of the leadership and governance should be about public service. The mindset should be a public service. Therefore, when you're in leadership, the idea would be to reduce, well, certainly not have any corruption. But to say, I don't feel we face that as much because we're a bit project focused, investment focused. So example, in Gambia, we are funding a guarantee on a solar plant, 10 megawatt, $9 million in guarantee. And the guarantee is to, protect against the failure of the national electric company to offtake the solar energy. So we do believe in some degrees of de-risking as well to protect against changes in project behavior. And that has attracted 15 million in private capital to come in. So I also would enforce the role of guarantees and de-risking, which also came into prominence at COP as well.
Great, thank you. I've got another question here. What do you think are the greatest threats to fragile food system value chains?
I would say one of the big threats is land degradation. I was just talking to the Malawi Minister of Environment in COP. Malawi is a big agricultural country, but she was saying they have a big threat of land degradation. There's huge amounts of land that's degraded. And I followed this trend as well. And there's some, I don't remember specific numbers, but perhaps we have 60 crops left in certain soils of the world. So my focus would be on perhaps soil rejuvenation linked to the food preservation and value chain preservation. And this is doable. There are also concepts of soil credits, that you sort of nurture the soil and as the nutrient and the kind of biodiversity within the soil grows, and there could be scope of, again, capital in terms of credit being attracted to it. So that I believe is the greatest threat. I think the concept of agroforestry in agriculture could also help preserve soil, help, keep the water sequestered in the soil. So those would be a couple of points, but related to land degradation.
Okay, I've got one last question for you from Armin Bauer. What I often hear from impact investors is that fresh money in forms of credit is not really needed. They have money but cannot place it because of weak business proposals and assumed investment risks. For addressing the investment risk, impact investors do not really like guarantees. There are other ways of reducing risk of impact investors. In Asia, and perhaps also in Africa, we are exploring a risk reduction and social innovation fund. Would you and CDF be interested in joining? Okay, that's a very specific question.
Well, absolutely. Let's say yes. I was just interested, of course, to hear what would be the risk reduction. It sort of a bit refers to the same aspect. But let me say largely another aspect before even the de-risking steps in is the partnership with the countries. One of the approaches we take at UNCDF is to really encourage the governance, the ministers, to outline their vision. How do they see their countries developing? And then be there solidly as development partners, helping them think through issues. And that itself means that the development is owned. It's owned by the country. It also means we try to bring the countries to the global stage. So in COP as well, you saw countries like Zambia, Niger, very much there. Guinea was the head of G77. So one country, one vote, that kind of equality, which then maybe leads to impact investors looking at these countries with different lenses. And of course, we work, as I said, on the pipeline. So maybe join us on the pipeline. We'll help make sure that they are more stable. But of course, I'd love to know more about the risk reduction and social innovation fund.
I'll let Armin reach out to you directly on that. Great. Well, I think we have to actually wrap up. We're a little bit over time, but really appreciate you joining today and sharing what you're doing at UNCDF, and for all the other support that you're providing for the Innovations Against Poverty program. So thank you very much, Preeti, and hope you have a good rest of the day.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mike. It was a real pleasure, a real honor to be here to share this time with you. I hope you found the comments interesting and could lead the pathways for future ideas and collaboration.
Great. Thanks a lot, Preeti.
Take care. Happy rest of the day as well.
Thank you.